The road leading to the old house was barely more than a dirt path, overgrown with thorny weeds that scraped against the sides of Maria's battered car as she drove. The sky was a sickly shade of gray, the kind that promised rain but never delivered. Beside her, little Liza pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging up the glass. "Are we almost there, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small and tired from the long journey. Maria forced a smile, though her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Just a little further, sweetheart." The house had been a bargain too good to be true, really. A two-story home with a wide porch, nestled between twisted, ancient trees. For a price that barely covered a year's rent in the city. The real estate agent had been eager to get rid of it, avoiding Maria's questions about why it had been empty for so long. "Just needs a little love," the woman had said with a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. When they finally pulled up to the property, Maria felt a cold prickle run down her spine. The house loomed before them, its peeling paint and sagging porch giving it a skeletal appearance. The windows were dark, like empty eye sockets staring back at her. Liza, however, seemed excited. "It's like a castle," she exclaimed, already unbuckling her seatbelt. Maria wished she could share her daughter's enthusiasm, but something about this place felt wrong. The front door groaned as Maria pushed it open. The scent of mildew, and something faintly metallic, hitting her nose. The floorboards creaked underfoot, as if warning her to turn back. Liza darted inside, her laughter echoing unnaturally in the hollow space. "Look, Mommy, there's a fireplace." Maria followed her in, her eyes scanning the walls. Where had those strange symbols come from? They were carved into the wood, faint but deliberate. Some looked like twisted versions of crosses, others like jagged, nonsensical scribbles. She made a mental note to paint over them later. As they explored, Maria noticed other oddities: a child's handprint smeared in something dark on the staircase, a closet door that wouldn't stay shut no matter how many times she closed it. The air grew heavier the further they went, as if the house itself was resisting their presence. When they reached the master bedroom, Maria found a rusted nail driven into the center of the floor. She knelt to pull it out, but the moment her fingers touched it, a sharp pain shot up her arm. She yanked her hand back. The nail was warm, as if something beneath the floorboards had been breathing on it. Night fell quickly, and with it came an unnatural silence. No crickets, no wind, just the occasional groan of the house settling. Maria tucked Liza into bed in the smaller of the two bedrooms. The one with faded cartoon wallpaper that might have been cheerful in another lifetime. "Try to get some sleep, okay? Tomorrow we'll make this place feel like home," Maria whispered, smoothing Liza's hair. But as she turned to leave, Liza's small voice stopped her. "Mommy, who's that lady in the corner?" Maria froze. The room was empty. "There's no one there, baby." Liza's eyes stayed fixed on the shadows near the closet. "She's smiling at me." Maria's blood turned to ice. She rushed to Liza's side, pulling her close. But when she looked again, nothing, just darkness. "It's just your imagination," she said, though her voice shook. That night, Maria lay awake, listening. The house wasn't silent anymore. There were whispers too faint to make out, but definitely voices. And then, just before dawn, she heard it. The sound of a child giggling. But Liza was fast asleep. Maria told herself it was just the house settling. Old buildings made noises, after all. The creaking floorboards, the distant scratching inside the walls. The way the air sometimes grew so thick it was hard to breathe. None of it had to mean anything. She repeated this like a mantra as she scrubbed the grime off the kitchen counters the next morning, her hands raw from bleach and effort. Liza sat at the wobbly table, coloring in a notebook she'd found in one of the empty cabinets. The pages were yellowed, the edges nibbled by something with small, sharp teeth. "You're up early," Maria said, forcing cheer into her voice. Liza didn't look up. Her crayon moved in slow, deliberate strokes, the color too dark to be anything but black. "Couldn't sleep," Liza murmured. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. A draft slithered through the kitchen. Though the windows were shut, Maria's skin prickled. She turned toward the hallway just in time to see the bathroom door swing open by itself. The faucet groaned, then spat out a thin trickle of rust-brown water. "Damn pipes," Maria muttered, but her pulse kicked up anyway. She marched over, twisted the handle shut, then froze. The mirror was fogged over, as if someone had just taken a steaming shower. Except the bathroom was ice cold. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and pale. Then, slowly, something else appeared in the glass. A shape, darker than the rest of the fog, standing right behind her. Tall, too tall. The silhouette of a woman with long, stringy hair, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, could only watch as the thing in the mirror raised a skeletal hand and pressed it against the glass. Fingers splayed like a spider's legs. A whimper escaped Maria's lips. She spun around, heart hammering, but the bathroom was empty. Just the dripping faucet, the chill air, and the creeping certainty that she wasn't alone. "Mommy." Liza's voice made her jump. The girl stood in the hallway, clutching her notebook to her chest. Her eyes were huge, unblinking. "I don't like it here." Maria scooped her up, holding her tight. Liz's skin was clammy. "We'll fix it up, make it nice," Maria whispered, but the words tasted like a lie. That night, Maria woke to the sound of crying. Not Liz's was softer, broken, the kind of sound that came from someone who'd been at it for hours. She followed it down the hall, her bare feet sticking to the floorboards like they were coated in something damp. The crying led her back to the bathroom. The door was ajar, the light inside flickering like a dying bulb. She pushed the door open. The bathtub was full of water, dark water, the surface rippling as if something had just slipped beneath. The crying had stopped. The silence was worse. Maria reached for the light switch. But before she could touch it, the water in the tub moved. A hand, bloated and gray, shot up and grabbed the edge of the porcelain. Maria stumbled back, a scream tearing from her throat, and then the lights cut out entirely. In the pitch black, something wet dragged itself out of the tub. She ran. Back in her room, she slammed the door and shoved the dresser in front of it. Her hands shaking so badly, she could barely grip the wood. Only then did she realize Liza's bed was empty. A small cold hand touched her shoulder from behind. "Mommy," Liza whispered, her voice all wrong. "Why did you leave me with her?" Maria turned. Her daughter's eyes were black from edge to edge. Maria's scream died in her throat as she stared into Liza's ink-black eyes. For one terrible second, the air between them crackled with something ancient and hungry. Then Liza blinked, and just like that, her eyes were normal again, wide and frightened. The eyes of a confused little girl who didn't understand why her mother was breathing so hard, why the furniture was blocking the door. "Mommy," Liza's voice trembled. "I had a bad dream." Maria pulled her close, her heart pounding so violently she was sure Liza could feel it. The scent of mildew and something faintly metallic clung to Liza's pajamas. "It's okay, baby," Maria whispered, running her fingers through Liz's hair only to freeze when her fingertips snagged on something damp and sticky. She pulled her hand back. in the dim moonlight seeping through the curtains. Her fingers gleamed dark and wet. Blood. But when she frantically checked Liza's scalp, there was no wound, no explanation. Just that awful, coppery smell lingering between them. The next few days passed in a haze of unpacked boxes and sleepless nights. Maria told herself the incidents were just stress, the move, the isolation. The way the house seemed to hold its breath whenever she entered a room. But then Liza started sleepwalking. The first time it happened, Maria woke to the sound of bare feet padding down the hallway. She found Liza in the kitchen, standing perfectly still in front of the open refrigerator. The pale light washed out her face, made her look like a ghost already. "Liza," Maria called softly, stepping closer. That's when she saw the raw steak clutched in Liza's small hands, teeth marks torn into the flesh, blood smeared around her mouth like grotesque lipstick. Liza Maria grabbed her shoulders, turning her around. Liza's eyes flew open. Not Liza's eyes. These were black pits, bottomless and gleaming. And when the thing wearing her daughter's face smiled, its teeth were too sharp, too many. "She's mine now," it growled, the voice a distorted echo of Liza's sweet tone. Maria recoiled and, just like that, Liza crumpled to the floor, her eyes rolling back before fluttering shut. When she woke minutes later, she remembered nothing. Not the meat, not the voice, not the way her mother's hands shook as she wiped the blood from her chin. But Maria remembered. She remembered the way the refrigerator door had swung shut on its own afterward. The way the shadows in the corner of the kitchen had seemed to ripple, as if something standing there had finally stepped away. The worst part was the silence that followed. The house stopped its creaking. The whispers in the walls ceased. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. It was the quiet of something waiting, something patient. Because it already knew it had one. That night, Maria dragged Liza's mattress into her own room, refusing to let her out of sight. But as she lay there, staring at the ceiling, she felt the unmistakable sensation of fingers, cold and skeletal, brushing through her hair. And from the foot of the bed, Liza sat up. Not Liza, not anymore. The thing wearing Liza's face sat perfectly still at the foot of the bed, its head tilted just slightly too far to the right. Moonlight bled through the curtains, casting long, skeletal fingers across the floorboards. Maria held her breath, her body frozen under the thin blanket, her mind screaming at her to move, to grab Liza and run, but where would they go? The house had them now. She knew that in the same way she knew the dark shape in the corner was just a shadow. "Mommy," the thing that wasn't Liza whispered, its voice syrup sweet and wrong, "why are you scared?" Maria's mouth went dry. She forced herself to sit up, her muscles trembling. The air smelled like wet earth and rotting flowers. "I'm not scared, baby," she lied, reaching out slowly. "Come here, let's." Liza's hand shot out, gripping Maria's wrist with impossible strength. The fingers were too long, the nails digging in like claws. "Liar," it giggled, the sound like breaking glass. Then, as suddenly as it had seized her, it let go, collapsing back onto the mattress like a discarded doll. Liza's chest rose and fell in the rhythm of sleep, her face smooth and innocent once more. Maria didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, she crept from the room, leaving Liza, she prayed, curled under the blankets. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against her eardrums. She needed answers. There had to be something, some clue left behind by the previous owners, something to explain why this was happening. She started in the basement. The stairs groaned under her weight, the wood soft with decay. The air down here was thick, suffocating, the walls sweating with condensation. Maria's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing stacks of moldy boxes, a broken rocking chair, and there, in the far corner, loose floorboard. Her fingers pried it up with a splintering crack. Beneath it lay a leather-bound diary, its pages warped with damp. The name on the first page made her blood run cold. Althea Reyes. 1987. Maria's hands shook as she flipped through the entries. The handwriting started neat, then deteriorated into jagged, frantic scrawls. The books say the ritual requires a sacrifice, but I don't have anything left to give, except her. My sweet Anna, but she's already gone. It answered me last night. It said it would bring her back if I gave it another child. A trade, but I can't. I won't. The later pages were nearly illegible, the ink blotted with what might have been terzor, something darker. It's in the walls now. It laughs when I sleep. It wears Anna's face and calls me Mommy. The final entry was a single sentence, written in a hand so shaky it barely resembled letters at all. It wants a mother and child, forever. Maria's breath hitched. A noise from upstairs snapped her head up, the sound of small, bare feet hitting the floorboards. Mommy. Liza's voice floated down the stairs, sweet and light. Who were you talking to? Maria hadn't spoken aloud. The flashlight flickered, then died. In the sudden darkness, something wet dripped onto the back of her neck. Maria's breath came in short, panicked bursts as she sat frozen in the basement darkness, the damp diary clutched against her chest like a shield. The wetness on her neck had evaporated into a cold, sticky residue that made her skin crawl. Above her, Liz's footsteps moved across the kitchen floor slow, deliberate, like someone who wasn't quite sure how to use their legs. Mommy. The voice drifted down again, closer now. The basement stairs creaked under an unseen weight. Maria's fingers found the flashlight, smacking it hard against her palm, until the beam flickered back to life. The light revealed nothing but empty space where the sound had come from. She swallowed the scream building in her throat and forced herself to stand, her legs trembling beneath her. The diary in her hands felt heavier than it should have, as though the pages were filled with more than just words. She emerged from the basement to find the kitchen empty, the morning sunlight streaming through the grimy windows in a way that felt mocking in its normalcy. A child's drawing lay on the table, Liza's work, though Maria didn't remember giving her any paper. The crayon strokes were frantic, the colors all wrong. A tall, faceless woman dominated the page, her stick-thin arms wrapped around a screaming child. Beneath it, in Liz's uneven handwriting, "We will join her soon." The refrigerator door swung open with a groan. Inside, the food Maria had bought just yesterday had rotted, crawling with maggots that writhed in the spoiled meat and curdled milk. The stench hit her like a physical blow, but worse was the handprint, small, child-sized, smudged in something dark and flaking on the inside of the door. Liza wasn't in her room, wasn't anywhere on the first floor. Maria's calls went unanswered as she climbed the stairs, each step creaking like a warning. The upstairs hallway stretched longer than it should have, the walls pressing in with every breath. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, twitching like insects when she turned to look. Liza's bedroom door was ajar. Maria pushed it open, her heart hammering. The room was empty except for the closet, its door swinging gently on its hinges. From within the darkness came a sound, wet, rhythmic, like something chewing. "Eliza." Maria's voice cracked. The chewing stopped. Silence. Then, from the depths of the closet, a giggle. Not Liza's. Something older. Something that knew exactly what fear tasted like. Maria lunged forward and yanked the closet door open. Empty. just a few wire hangers swaying from the rod, their shadows stretching long and twisted across the back wall. A cold breath tickled the back of Maria's neck. She spun around and saw them. The shadows in the corner of the room weren't shadows at all. They were figures, tall and emaciated. Their elongated limbs folded against the walls like spiders waiting to strike. Their faces were smooth, blank canvases, but Maria could feel them watching her, smiling at her. The light bulb overhead burst in a shower of sparks. In the sudden darkness, something grabbed her wrist. "Tag," Liz's voice whispered from somewhere too close, her breath reeking of spoiled meat. "You're it, Mommy." Maria tore her wrist free from that cold, clutching grasp and stumbled backward into the hallway, her pulse roaring in her ears. The darkness in Liza's bedroom pulsed like a living thing, the shadow figures twitching at the edges of her vision. She didn't stop running until she was outside, the morning sun doing nothing to warm the ice in her veins. She needed help. Father Mendoza arrived at dusk. His aged face, grim, as he surveyed the house from the safety of the driveway. The crucifix around his neck gleamed dully in the fading light. "You're sure it's not just an overactive imagination?" he asked, though the way his fingers tightened around his Bible suggested he already knew the answer. Maria opened her mouth to reply, and the front door slammed open on its own. Inside, the house had changed. The walls bled dark, viscous fluid that oozed from hairline cracks like weeping wounds. The air stank of sulfur and rotting meat. Somewhere deep within the house, a child laughed, a sound that started as Liz's giggle before distorting into something guttural, something that rattled the windows. Father Mendoza crossed the threshold, holy water in hand. In Nomen Patris, the door slammed shut behind him, cutting off Maria's view. She threw herself against the wood, pounding, screaming, but the house had sealed itself. From inside came a crash, then Father Mendoza's voice, not praying now, but screaming. The sound cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, tearing noise. The door swung open. Maria fell forward, catching herself on hands and knees. The hallway stretched before her, impossibly long, the walls pulsing with that same dark fluid. At the far end, Father Mendoza's body lay twisted, his limbs bent at angles the human body shouldn't allow. His crucifix had melted into his chest, the metal seared black. And standing over him, haloed in the flickering light of a single dying bulb, was Liza. Her head lolled to one side, her mouth stretched in a grin too wide for her face. When she spoke, the voice that came out was layered, a chorus of whispers beneath Liza's own. "He shouldn't have tried to take us away." Behind her, the shadow figures emerged from the walls, their elongated fingers twitching. Maria scrambled backward, her hands slipping in something warm and wet. The house groaned around her, the ceiling sagging as though something enormous pressed down from above. Father Mendoza's dead eyes snapped open, his jaw unhinging like a snake's. "You can't have them," he rasped, except it wasn't his voice. It was the house, the thing in the walls. The thing wearing her daughter's skin. Liza took a step forward, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the floor. "Don't you want to be with me forever, Mommy?" Somewhere in the house, a clock struck midnight. The lights went out. Maria's back hit the front door as she fumbled for the handle, her fingers slipping on sweat and something thicker, something that smelled like rust and spoiled meat. The darkness pressed against her like a living thing, breathing its hot, rancid breath down her neck. Somewhere in the blackness, Liza giggled that terrible, layered sound that wasn't entirely human anymore. The door wouldn't open. Metal screeched as the deadbolt twisted itself shut. Maria's breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She turned, pressing her back against the wood, as shapes moved in the gloom. The shadow figures from the walls peeled themselves free, their two long limbs unfolding like spiders emerging from cracks. "Liza," Maria screamed, her voice breaking. "Baby, please." A match flared to life in the center of the hallway. Liza stood there, the tiny flame casting flickering shadows across her face. Her eyes reflected the light like an animal's, shining, hungry. The match burned down to her fingertips, but she didn't flinch as it scorched her skin. "Don't be scared, Mommy," she cooed, tilting her head at an unnatural angle. "She just wants to love us." The shadows behind Liza shifted, coagulating into something taller. Something with a woman's silhouette, but all wrong, the limbs, too thin. The neck stretched, the face, a smooth, featureless oval. Althea Maria knew it with sudden, gut-wrenching certainty. The woman from the diary. The first mother this house had claimed. The temperature dropped. Frost crackled across the walls, spreading like veins. Maria's breath fogged in the air as the thing that had been Althea reached out one skeletal hand toward Liza. Something inside Maria snapped. She launched forward, grabbing Liza around the waist. The child's body was ice cold, her skin waxy and wrong, but Maria held on like a drowning woman clutching driftwood. Liza shrieked, the sound tearing at Maria's eardrums, her fingers clawing at Maria's arms hard enough to draw blood. The shadow figures surged forward. Maria ran up the stairs, each step groaning underfoot, the wood softening like rotting flesh. Behind her, the walls pulsed, the house itself coming alive, hungry. Liza thrashed in her arms, her voice deepening, warping. Let me go back to her." But Maria didn't stop. The attic. There was a window in the attic, a way out. She burst through the door, just as something grabbed at her ankle cold, skeletal fingers curling around her flesh. Maria kicked free, stumbling into the dusty space. The window was small, grimy, but intact. Outside, the storm raged, lightning flashing like a strobe. Liza went limp in her arms. For one terrible second, Maria thought she was too late. Then Liza's eyes fluttered open, her real eyes, brown and frightened and human. "Mommy," she whimpered, her small hands clutching at Maria's shirt. "Make it stop." The attic door slammed shut behind them. Something scratched at the wood. Slow, deliberate, like a mother coming to tuck in her child. The scratching at the attic door stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of Maria's panicked breathing and Liza's quiet whimpers against her chest. Moonlight streamed through the grimy window, casting long, distorted shadows across the floorboards that seemed to twitch when Maria wasn't looking directly at them. She pressed a kiss to Liza's forehead, tasting salt and something faintly metallic. Blood or tears, she couldn't tell. The diary in her back pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Maria pulled it out with shaking hands, the pages sticking together as she flipped to the final entries she hadn't read before. The handwriting here was different, not Althea's desperate scrawl, but something older, darker, the ink so black it seemed to absorb the dim light. The first mother gave her child willingly, the text whispered across the page in letters that squirmed under Maria's gaze. But the house is always hungry. It needs a new mother, a new child, a cycle without end. A floorboard creaked behind them. Maria whirled around, clutching Liza tighter, but there was nothing there. Just shadows that moved wrong, that stretched too long toward where they huddled by the window. Liza's small fingers dug into Maria's arm. "She's coming," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "She says ... She says we have to stay. That all mommies and babies stay forever." The attic door handle began to turn slowly, the rusted metal squealing in protest. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she watched it rotate all the way around. A full, impossible circle no normal mechanism could make. The diary fell from her numb fingers, landing open on a page she hadn't seen before. A crude drawing stared up at her. A woman and child standing before a house, their hands linked, their mouths open in silent screams. Beneath it, a single line: "The only way out is in." The door burst open with a sound like a dying animal's last gasp. Althea stood in the doorway, her form flickering between the shadow thing Maria had seen earlier and a broken, hollow-eyed woman in a tattered dress. Behind her, the hallway stretched into impossible darkness, the walls breathing in and out like living flesh. "You don't understand," Althea whispered, her voice layered with dozens of others. "You think you're saving her, but the house always wins. It took my Anna. It will take your Liza, unless..." Her head tilted at that unnatural angle again. "Unless you take her place." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and for the first time, Maria understood. This had never been about Liza. It had always been about her. The attic air thickened with the scent of wet earth and burning hair. As Althea's words coiled around Maria's heart, Liza trembled violently against her, small fingers clutching at Maria's shirt like she was the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. The realization crashed over Maria like a wave of ice water. This curse didn't want her daughter. It wanted her. Althea's shadowy form flickered, momentarily revealing the broken woman beneath hollow cheeks streaked with decades-old tear tracks. Lips cracked from screaming. "You see now," she whispered, her voice shifting between the guttural growl of the house and something heartbreakingly human. "The house needs a mother's love to sustain it, not the child. Never the child." Maria's gaze dropped to the fallen diary. The pages had turned themselves to a new section, a ritual, written in that same impossible ink that seemed to squirm on the paper. Her stomach lurched as she recognized the symbols scratched into their own walls downstairs. "A life for a life," the text whispered. "One mother's sacrifice breaks the chain." Liza suddenly stiffened in her arms. "No," the girl shrieked, her voice distorting as shadows leaked from her mouth and nose. "She lies. She wants to take you away." The child's body thrashed with unnatural strength, her head snapping back to reveal eyes gone completely black. The house itself seemed to recoil at Maria's dawning understanding. The walls pulsed like a slowing heartbeat, the groaning timbers taking on a panicked edge. Maria tightened her grip on Lisaha, real Liza, still fighting beneath the thing's control as the truth crystallized. Althea hadn't summoned the demon. She'd tried to stop it. The shadow figures at the edges of the attic began to shriek, their forms unraveling like smoke in wind as Maria reached for the diary. The ritual was clear: a mother's voluntary sacrifice would break the cycle, but not by giving herself to the house, by taking Althea's place as its prisoner. Liza's small hand suddenly gripped Maria's wrist with terrifying strength, the bones creaking under the pressure. "You'll never leave me," the thing wearing her daughter's face promised, its smile stretching too wide. "Never, ever, ever." Maria brought her forehead down hard against Liza's. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through her skull, but the grip on her wrist loosened. Liza collapsed, sobbing, into her arms. Just Liza again, if only for this moment. Around them, the house roared in fury, the attic door slamming shut as the walls began to bleed in earnest. Althea's form solidified before them, her human eyes full of desperate hope. "There's not much time," she urged. "The words, you have to say them now." Maria looked down at her daughter's tear-streaked face, then at the crumbling diary in her hands. The choice was no choice at all. She opened her mouth to begin the ritual, just as the attic window shattered inward, not from the storm, from something climbing in. The shattering glass rained down like jagged hail as a monstrous silhouette hauled itself through the broken window. Moonlight glistened on its slick, elongated limbs, a grotesque mockery of the shadow figures Maria had seen before. But solid now, real, its flesh pulsing with the same unnatural rhythm as the house itself. Liza screamed, a raw, primal sound that seemed to tear at the very air around them. Maria acted without thinking. She shoved Liza behind her, shielding her daughter's body with her own as the creature unfolded to its full height, its featureless face dripping with something thick and black. The stench of decay rolled off it in waves, making Maria's eyes water. Althea moved faster. With a cry that held decades of pent-up rage, the ghostly woman threw herself at the creature. Their forms collided in a whirl of shadows and flickering light, Althea's spectral hands clawing at the thing's face as she screamed, "Now, Maria, say it, now." The diary trembled in Maria's hands, the ritual words burning themselves into her vision. Her voice shook as she began to recite the incantation, each syllable tasting like ash on her tongue. The house responded immediately. The floorboards buckled beneath them. The walls screamed as if made of living flesh, and from somewhere deep below came a sound like a great heart skipping a beat. The creature howled and threw Althea aside, her ghostly form hitting the far wall with enough force to make her flicker like a dying candle. It lunged for Maria, its clawed fingers outstretched, only to freeze inches from her face as Liza suddenly darted out from behind her mother. Nate, Maria grabbed for her, but it was too late. Liza stood between Maria and the monster, her tiny hands raised as if to push it away. The creature hesitated, its head cocking to one side in a horribly familiar gesture, the same way Liza tilted her head when she was curious about something. For one impossible second, the attic fell silent. Then Liza spoke, her voice small but steady. "You can have me," she whispered, "but let my mommy go." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. "No, no, no, no." The creature shuddered, its form rippling, as if caught in a strong wind. Behind them, Althea gasped. "It's listening," she breathed. "It wants the offer." Maria didn't let her finish. With a cry torn from the depths of her soul, she yanked Liza back and stepped forward herself, placing her body between her daughter and the abomination. "Take me instead," she demanded, her voice stronger now. "You want a mother, here I am. But my daughter walks away." The house held its breath. The creature went perfectly still. Then, slowly, it reached out one dripping, clawed hand, and wrapped its fingers around Maria's wrist. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was Liza screaming her name. Darkness swallowed Maria whole. For a moment that stretched into eternity, she floated in a void without sound, without light, without even the sensation of her own breath. Then, all at once, the world rushed back in a nauseating swirl of color and sound. She was standing in the attic, but not the attic she knew. The walls pulsed like living flesh, veins of black ichor threading through the warped wood. The shattered window was gone, replaced by a gaping maw of darkness that whispered in 1,000 overlapping voices. And the creature, the thing that had taken her, was nowhere to be seen. "Liza," Maria's voice cracked. No answer came but the drip 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 of something thick falling from the ceiling. She stumbled forward, her legs moving, as if through water. The attic door stood ajar, revealing a hallway that stretched far longer than the house should allow. At the end, a faint glow beckoned. Maria ran, her bare feet slapping against the wet floorboards, her pulse roaring in her ears. The glow resolved into a scene that stopped her dead. Liza Harriel, unharmed, Liza stood in the front yard, her small face turned up to the morning sun. Behind her, the house looked normal. Just an old, abandoned building with peeling paint and sagging gutters. No shadows moved behind the windows. No whispers slithered from its walls. Maria screamed her daughter's name, pounding on some invisible barrier between them. Liza didn't turn, didn't hear. A hand touched Maria's shoulder. Althea stood beside her, her ghostly form now solid, her face no longer twisted in anguish. "She's safe," she murmured. "You broke the cycle." Maria whirled on her. "Then let me go back." Althea's smile was unbearably sad. "It doesn't work that way. The house always keeps its mother." Outside, a social worker's car pulled up the driveway. Maria watched through tears as a woman knelt before Liza, speaking too softly to hear. After a moment, Liza nodded and took the woman's hand, casting one last glance at the house before being led away. The image wavered, then dissolved like smoke. The hallway around Maria darkened, the walls closing in. Althea's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You'll learn to see her, in time, in reflections, in dreams. When she whispers your name at night and wonders why she still remembers." The floor gave way beneath Maria. She fell and landed in a perfect replica of her old kitchen. The coffee pot steamed on the counter. Liza's crayon drawings hung on the fridge. Through the window, an endless gray sky stretched over a yard that never changed seasons. From the hallway came the sound of small, familiar footsteps. "Mommy," called a voice that wasn't quite Liza's. "Are you home?" Maria took a shuddering breath and turned toward the sound. Somewhere in the real world, years later, a grown woman named Liza Reyes would pause outside an empty lot where no house had stood for decades. She'd feel the inexplicable urge to whisper, "I remember you." And in the Forever House, a shadow would press against an upstairs window, waiting, always waiting.